Avoidants are not moved by grand gestures or emotional intensity. These approaches trigger their defenses and activate their retreat response. But certain acts of kindness bypass their protective walls entirely, reaching the vulnerable parts of them they work so hard to conceal. These are not manipulative tactics but genuine expressions of care that avoidants rarely experience. When someone offers them in the right way, the avoidant's entire system responds differently. They begin to feel safe rather than threatened, seen rather than pressured, valued rather than consumed. And paradoxically, this safety creates the conditions where the avoidant stops running and starts moving closer. If you want to know what actually reaches an avoidant's guarded heart, subscribe for insights that go beyond surface advice into what genuinely shifts their attachment patterns. Respecting their need for space without resentment. The first act of kindness that disarms an avoidant is giving them space without making them feel guilty about needing it. Most people respond to an avoidance withdrawal with hurt, accusation, or demands for explanation. This confirms the avoidant's fear that their needs are burdensome and connection requires self-sacrifice. But when someone can say genuinely, without passive aggression or hidden resentment, that space is fine and they will be there when the avoidant is ready, it creates a revolutionary experience. The avoidant discovers that their autonomy is not a threat to connection. They can breathe, retreat, recharge without destroying what they are building. This kindness is not about accepting disrespect or tolerating breadcrumbs. It is about recognizing that avoidants process emotions differently and offering them the room to do so without punishment. When they realize their space is respected rather than weaponized against them, they stop fearing closeness as much because closeness no longer means loss of self. Offering help without expecting vulnerability in return. Avoidants struggle profoundly with receiving care because they associate it with debt, obligation, and the expectation that they must now be emotionally available in return. The second act of kindness that moves them is practical help offered freely, without strings attached. Fixing something broken, handling a task they mentioned, solving a problem they were stressed about, all done quietly without fanfare or expectation of gratitude that requires emotional reciprocation. This bypasses their defenses because it is not asking for intimacy. It is simply demonstrating care through action rather than words. The avoidant feels cared for without feeling trapped. They begin to associate this person with relief rather than pressure, with ease rather than obligation. Over time, this consistent practical support creates a foundation of trust that allows emotional connection to develop naturally, rather than being forced prematurely, maintaining your own emotional stability. The third act of kindness, and perhaps the most powerful, is refusing to make the avoidant responsible for your emotional regulation. When someone can remain grounded, can handle the avoidant's inconsistency without falling apart, can maintain their own life and happiness independent of the avoidant's behavior, it demonstrates a level of emotional maturity that is incredibly attractive. The avoidant has spent their life around people whose moods depended entirely on their level of engagement. This created enormous pressure and guilt. But when someone shows them that their withdrawal does not cause devastation, that their presence is appreciated but not necessary for the other person's well-being, it removes the heaviest burden the avoidant carries. They can relax, they can be imperfect, they can show up inconsistently without destroying someone. This kindness is self-preservation dressed as generosity, but for the avoidant, it feels like permission to be human, celebrating their independence instead of resenting it. The fourth act of kindness is genuinely appreciating the avoidant's autonomy rather than seeing it as rejection. When someone can say sincerely that they admire the avoidant's self-sufficiency, that they respect their boundaries, that they find their independence attractive rather than threatening, it rewrites the avoidant's entire relational script. They are used to their need for space being framed as a character flaw, a sign of emotional unavailability, a problem to be fixed. But when someone celebrates it as a strength while also showing that connection is still possible, the avoidant begins to believe that maybe they can be loved as they are, rather than only being acceptable if they fundamentally change, never making them explain their feelings. The fifth act of kindness is the most subtle but most impactful, never demanding emotional processing before the avoidant is ready. Most people, when hurt or confused by avoidant behavior, immediately ask for explanations, require discussions, need to process what happened. This sends the avoidant into panic because they do not have answers that feel legitimate, and being forced to articulate feelings they have not processed creates shame and defensiveness. But when someone can accept that the avoidant will share when ready, that silence does not always need to be filled, that emotional processing happens at different speeds for different people, it creates safety. The avoidant begins to trust that they will not be ambushed with conversations they are not prepared for, and paradoxically, this makes them more likely to open up voluntarily when they feel secure enough to do so.